Hey, you guys. Now, back in the before times of the 1980s, we got our news from TV, radio, and the newspapers. If Tom Brokaw or Dan Rather didn't say it, it didn't happen. If you didn't hear about it on the radio at the top of the hour, it wasn't happening in your town. And if you didn't read about it in the newspaper, it wasn't even a thing. The news sources were definitely limited. We didn't get endless amounts of information pumped into our veins 24 hours a day from cable news networks and the internet, but that didn't mean there weren't plenty of headlines, newsmakers, and events to talk about. But here's the thing, the people and events making news in the 1980s in the eyes of adults didn't always translate to kids. I was born in 1977, so I was between the ages of 3 and 13 in the 80s. I don't remember when Ronald Reagan was shot, or John Lennon. I don't remember it. I had no idea what Black Monday or stock market crash meant. What even is a savings and loan scandal? And who is this Oliver North guy? And why is he preempting all of my mom's favorite soap operas? But my questions didn't stop there. Why did the term monkey business have a whole new meaning? And who is this Michael Dukakis person? And why is he riding around in a tank? As a kid in the 80s, the news that I remember, what was important to me, was usually very different from what my parents were talking about. And that's what today's video is all about. Hi, my name is Natalie. Welcome to my channel, my so-called Gen X life, and this is part 1 of the biggest news stories of the 80s according to an 80s kid. Okay, before I get to my list, I feel the need to give you a little bit of context. As a kid growing up in the 80s in a small town in the Midwest, my news sources were Teen Beat, MTV, People Magazine, and Sports Illustrated. I did absorb a tiny sliver of whatever my parents were listening to, watching, and reading, but most of it really didn't interest me. I will confess, though, to diving into the Reader's Digest every month so I could laugh at life in these United States. Laughter is the best medicine, and humor in uniform. I wanted to know everything there was to know about New Kids on the Block and Debbie Gibson. It was my dream to see Tiffany during her mall tour. I watched The A-Team, Growing Pains, and Family Ties every week to crush on Dirk Benedict, Kirk Cameron, and Michael J. Fox. Oh, and that opening to Unsolved Mysteries, it haunted my dreams. Saturday morning cartoons, Pee-wee's Playhouse, This Week in Baseball, and a big bowl of sugary cereal were non-negotiable. My weekend didn't start without them. And holy crap, when we got cable, I discovered they made a network just for kids called Nickelodeon, and another for 24/7 sports called ESPN. Absolute 80s kid heaven. When Back to the Future and Goonies were in theaters, it was an absolute must that I go see these movies and then rent them over and over again when they made it to the video store. I do remember when Live Aid happened, but I don't recall watching it. The benefit concert that had more impact on me as a kid was Farm Aid. And of course, who could forget We Are the World? Speaking of unforgettable 80s moments, I probably shouldn't admit this, but I still remember most of the words to the Super Bowl Shuffle. We're not here to start no trouble. We're just here to do the Super Bowl Shuffle. Magic, Michael, and Bird were my superheroes. I vividly remember the McDonald's promos for the 1984 Summer Olympics and Mary Lou Retton. I was heartbroken after watching Don Deckinger miss that call at first base in Game 6 of the 1985 World Series. I watched the ball go through Bill Buckner's legs in Game 6 of the 86 World Series, and I will never forget the earthquake before Game 3 in 1989. So this gives you an idea of where my mind was in the 80s. So what were the biggest, most important news stories from the 80s that I remember? What cultural events have left a mark in my brain for 40 years? Well, there's...
Hold on to your seats, hold on to your arms, hold on to everything. It's Michael Jackson's Thriller, a short film by John Landis that'll scare you out of your tree. See it here only on MTV.
Creatures crawl in search of blood to terrorize your neighborhood.
Michael Jackson's Thriller, first and exclusively on MTV Music Television.
What 80s kid could forget the debut of a nearly 14-minute music video starring dancing zombies and a teenage werewolf? Michael Jackson's landmark Thriller video premiered on December 2nd, 1983, which was an entire year after the Thriller album was released. It had already sold 10 million copies and sat atop the Billboard 200 album chart for 17 straight weeks. But when the album slipped to number 2, Jackson wanted to reclaim that number 1 spot, and the best way to do it, he thought, was with a memorable music video, like he had done with Billie Jean and Beat It. Epic's head of promotions, Frank DeLeo, suggested Jackson shoot another promo clip, this time for the album's title track. It's simple, DeLeo recalled telling Jackson in a Vanity Fair interview. All you gotta do is dance, sing, and make it scary. For his part, Jackson's idea for the video was based on his desire to, quote, turn into a monster just for fun. After seeing American Werewolf in London, he sought out director John Landis to help make it happen. Jackson wanted to make sure that the tone of his thriller film was creepy comical, not genuinely terrifying. Landis told Jackson that he would not direct Thriller as a music video, proposing instead that they collaborate on a short narrative film that could be released in theaters. Landis would write a storyline inspired by the song about a cute young guy on a date who turns into a monster. The short would be shot on 35mm film with feature film production values, including great locations and an impressive dance number. Landis would call in a favor from Rick Baker, the Oscar-winning makeup wizard who had created the title creature for An American Werewolf in London, and get him to design Jackson's transformation makeup. Jackson was enthusiastic about Landis's vision and immediately said, "Let's do it." To pay for the nearly $1 million cost of the video, Jackson and Landis decided to make a 45-minute documentary about the making of it and made deals with MTV and Showtime for exclusive rights. Plus, they put the music video and the doc on home video to sell to fans for $29.95, a concept that pioneered the world of sell-through home videos. Remember, this was in a world before video rental stores.
Well, right now you're in East Los Angeles. It's mainly a Hispanic neighborhood. A lot of industry in this area where we are now on Union Pacific Avenue. And unfortunately, somebody leaked to the press or the radio stations today to broadcast that we're going to be all over Los Angeles, Broadway, in this section of town. That's why you see 300-400 children here. And they've all come out to see Michael Jackson.
I found out about it from my mom, and I drug her down here with me from Van Nuys, and we just came down to see him dance, have a good time.
It was the Thriller video that pushed Jackson over the top and cemented his position as the king of pop, a royal title he encouraged and Elizabeth Taylor helped popularize. And he would continue to dominate pop culture for the rest of the decade. More than 40 years later, Thriller is still the most popular and influential music video of all time. In January 2010, it was designated as a national treasure by the Library of Congress and became the first music video to be inducted into the National Film Registry.
The only place on TV you can see Thriller is here on MTV, and we are proud of it. It is more than just a video. It's a short film and quite a piece of art from Michael Jackson and John Landis. We're real happy to have it here.
It's just how you feel when you know it's for real. It's a hit, it's a Coke is it.
There's never been a better taste. There's never been a better Coke. Introducing the greatest taste discovery in 100 years. Introducing the new taste of Coca-Cola. A taste that is Coke and everything a Coke means. A taste that's very familiar, yet totally new. A taste so good, so real, it couldn't be anything but a Coke. The great new taste of Coke. Watch for it, try it, and enjoy the best tasting Coke ever.
In April 1985, Coca-Cola committed one of the biggest consumer product blunders in modern times. Fearing that rival Pepsi was encroaching on their market share, Coca-Cola tinkered with the recipe they had stuck to for the previous 99 years. The result, New Coke, was alleged to be a hit in research markets, with less of an acidic bite and more of a sweet, syrupy flavor. More like Pepsi. Coke was certain their refined taste would lead to a dramatic increase in the liquid sugar market share. But they were wrong. Fans revolted, stockpiling original Coke and selling it at a markup. Thousands of calls and letters flooded the company's Atlanta headquarters. Company spokespeople tried damage control in the press.
As far as Coca-Cola was concerned, it was a red, white, and blue American celebration that day last month when they ditched the old Coke and unveiled the new. But the diehards say the old Coke was the real thing, new Coke a mere imposter, and they won't swallow it.
Would you like to sign a petition, get back the old Coke?
Karen Wilson's a diehard. For the past week, she's been standing on street corners in Palo Alto, California, asking people to taste new Coke.
No, I like the old Coke better.
Would you sign a petition?
And collecting signatures, trying to convince Coca-Cola that the new Coke is not it.
It just goes down your stomach like a dead glass of water, whereas the old Coke just bites.
Coca-Cola's most visible and vocal opponent was a retired medical researcher named Gay Mullins, who embodied the collective distaste for New Coke by spending $100,000 of his own money to form an activist group. He planned and organized protests and became a familiar face on television newscasts, declaring New Coke's existence was totally un-American. And people listened. Mullen told numerous reporters that he was outraged over the putrid, soapy, fizzless mess and would pour New Coke down a sewer drain for the cameras. But how and why did Coke make such a massive mistake? The idea of New Coke was conceived in 1984 when Coca-Cola began to experience a degree of paranoia about their status as the world's top soft drink. Back in 1972, 18% of soda drinkers said they preferred Coca-Cola, with just 4% opting for Pepsi. By the early 1980s, that had receded dramatically. Pepsi now had an 11% approval rating, with Coke barely ahead at 12%. Amid the great soda wars of the 1980s and the popular Pepsi Challenge marketing campaign, Coke execs were sensing that palates might have evolved to prefer Pepsi's sweeter taste. So, Coca-Cola chemists toyed with a formula that delivered less of a fizzy bite. Testing in regional markets was highly encouraging. New Coke was preferred by a substantial margin. After sinking $4 million into development costs, Coca-Cola launched New Coke in April 1985 and immediately faced backlash. New Coke wasn't a peripheral product. It was a replacement for what would come to be known as Classic Coke, inciting a burst of negative feedback. Consumers had an emotional investment in the drink. Coke's headquarters received upwards of 1,500 calls a day, up from the normal 400, with virtually all of them complaining about the change. At this point, Mullins decided to enter the fray in a very high-profile manner. Having tasted and rejected New Coke, he used his retirement fund to form a coalition called the Old Soda Drinkers of America and set up a bank of 900 numbered telephone lines in a Seattle office. For $5, anti-New Coke activists would receive newsletters, bumper stickers with a slogan that said Coke was it, pins, and plans to hold rallies in their local areas. In Atlanta, picketers held up signs that read things like, "My children will never know real refreshment." Armed with hyperbole, Mullins quickly became a media favorite. Surrounded by his banks of telephones that cost $10,000 a week to maintain, he railed against the corporate blunder and vowed to do whatever it took to return Coke Classic to store shelves. "How can they do this?" he told People magazine. "They were guarding a sacred trust. Coca-Cola has tied this drink to the very fabric of America. Apple pie, baseball, the Statue of Liberty. And now they replace it with a new formula and they tell us to just forget it? They have taken away my freedom of choice. It's un-American." The bland New Coke, he said, was unbelievably wimpy. In June of 1985, the same month that Pepsi gleefully announced a 14% spike in overall product sales, Mullins filed a class action lawsuit against the Coca-Cola Company in the United States District Court, citing Fair Trade Commission rules about misleading product advertising. Mullins called for Coca-Cola to be restrained from packaging New Coke into Coke Classic cans. Mullins insisted they either comply or turn over the highly guarded recipe so that someone else could make the drink. The new stuff, he wrote in his complaint, tasted like Pepsi, which was an unforgivable slight. Federal Judge Walter McGovern tossed the complaint out in less than a week. But it didn't matter. On July 10th, Coca-Cola finally capitulated, with Peter Jennings interrupting an ABC daytime soap to announce that the company would be bringing back its original drink. New Coke wouldn't disappear, at least not immediately, but consumers could have a choice. Mullins was elated. Though he had spent roughly $100,000 drumming up support for the cause, he said it was worth it to prove that consumers had a voice. In their first sensible marketing decision of the year, Coca-Cola decided to capitalize on Mullen's advocacy by promising to send him the first new case of old Coke that rolled out of their Atlanta plant. In front of press, Mullins downed a can, then doused himself over the head with the rest, and the 79-day drought was over.
What on earth brought us to the decision to bring back the classic taste which we so calmly abandoned back in April? Well, there is a twist to this story, which it seems to me will please every humanist, and will probably have Harvard professors puzzling for years. The simple fact is that all of the time and money and skill poured into consumer research on the new Coca-Cola could not measure or reveal the depth and abiding emotional attachment to original Coca-Cola felt by so many people.
Cyanide-contaminated Tylenol has been responsible for 3 deaths in the Arlington Heights area. Do not take Tylenol until further notice.
In the early morning hours of September 29, 1982, in Elk Grove Village, just outside Chicago, 12-year-old Mary Kellerman woke up feeling under the weather. She had a sore throat and a runny nose. Her parents, like so many of us back then, reached for the familiar bottle of Tylenol in their medicine cabinet. They gave her one extra strength capsule. What they didn't know, what no one could have known, was that it was laced with potassium cyanide. By 7 a.m., Mary was dead. That single moment sparked a tragedy that would haunt the nation and change the way we purchase over-the-counter medication. On that same day, in Arlington Heights, Illinois, a 27-year-old postal worker named Adam Janis collapsed. At first, doctors thought it was a heart attack, but soon they found cyanide in his system too. In the wake of his death, his brothers Stanley and sister-in-law Teresa, just 25 and 19, rushed to his home, overwhelmed with grief. To ease their pounding headaches, they took Tylenol from the same bottle Adam had used. Stanley died that day, and Teresa followed 2 days later. 3 lives, lost in a matter of hours, all tied to a bottle of Tylenol. Over the next few days, 3 more lives were taken: Mary McFarland, Paula Prince, and Mary Weiner, all in the Chicago area. Each had taken Tylenol shortly before they died.
Arlington Heights police demonstrated tonight how they have been warning residents throughout the day. And in Chicago, police notified all officers of the threat.
This product may be contaminated with cyanide and should be destroyed.
The first death yesterday morning was in Elk Grove Village, a 12-year-old girl, Mary Kellerman. And then in Arlington Heights, the deaths of 2 brothers and the critical illness of one of their wives. Now tonight, a 4th death in the DuPage County town of Winfield has been linked to the altered medicine. And in Downers Grove, still another death suspected of being cyanide poisoning. The bottles were labeled extra strength Tylenol, 50 capsule size, lot number MC2880, expiration date April 1987. If you have a Tylenol bottle marked that way, destroy it.
At the present time, I think that would be a safe policy until further investigation, until we can perhaps determine where the contamination took place. If it were me, I wouldn't take them.
Officials began testing Tylenol samples at random from area stores, but could find no additional traces of poison. Still, with more than 93,000 bottles from the same batch distributed through more than 30 states, the manufacturer ordered store owners to clear their shelves.
We're taking off the shelf all the Tylenol capsules and anything with the code number MC on it. We're pulling everything off. We don't know if it's good or bad yet. We were just told to pull everything off.
One tainted container was traced back to this jewel store in Elk Grove Village.
By early October, investigators connected the dots. Someone was deliberately lacing Tylenol capsules with cyanide. This wasn't a manufacturing error. Police realized the killer was taking bottles off store shelves, tampering with them, and slipping them back into stores, waiting for unsuspecting victims to bring them home. Back then, Tylenol was the go-to pain reliever. 31 million bottles sat in homes and stores across the country. The news hit like a thunderbolt and nearly destroyed Johnson & Johnson. As you can imagine, sales absolutely plummeted. I was barely 5 years old at the time, but I remember my parents checking our medicine cabinet, wondering if we were safe. Johnson & Johnson acted fast and recalled every single bottle. Then they worked with the FDA to create tamper-proof packaging, those foil seals and caplets we take for granted today. That was the legacy that was born from this tragedy. To this day, however, the perpetrators of the Chicago Tylenol murders have never been found.
This shopping mall in affluent Westchester County, New York, exemplifies how easy it is for children, or adults for that matter, to get their hands on satanic material.
Vigilante parents dug under a preschool searching for secret tunnels. The police swapped tips on identifying pagan symbols. A company that sold toothpaste and soap had to deny repeatedly that it was acting as an agent of Satan. These were all things that happened back in the 1980s when the fear of satanic cults committing mass child abuse spread around the country. Talk shows and news programs fanned those fears, and the authorities investigated hundreds of allegations.
Across this country and Canada, satanic graffiti is turning up on public buildings and abandoned buildings, where police suspect secret meetings are being held by people calling themselves Satanist, people who worship the devil. Most often found, the inverted five-pointed satanic pentagram, the upside-down cross, the evil eye, references to Babylon, and the devil's number, 666.
Some cases collapsed, but others saw defendants go to prison, families traumatized, and millions of dollars spent on prosecutions. The phenomenon was so sprawling that in its aftermath, it took on the name the Satanic Panic. In 2021, former FBI agent Ken Lanning, who worked on hundreds of those abuse cases with the Bureau's Behavioral Science Unit, told the New York Times that, quote, the evidence wasn't there, but the allegations of satanic ritual abuse never really went away. When people get emotionally involved in an issue, common sense and reason go out the window. People believe what they want and need to believe. It seems as though the spark to the panic was in 1980 when the best-selling book Michelle Remembers was published. Written by a Canadian psychologist and his former patient, the book was about her memories of childhood abuse at the hands of Satanists, and it left readers in shock. Suddenly, it seemed like terror could be lurking in any neighborhood. At the time, more kids than ever were in daycare, since more women were going to work, some by choice, some by necessity. And at the same time, the public was starting to confront the problem of sexual abuse, especially involving children. You hook all of those things together magically, and boom, you've got the proper fuel for a moral panic, a sociology professor told the Times. In the summer of 1983, a woman in Manhattan Beach, California, accused an employee at her son's preschool, McMartin, of abusing him. The police sent a letter to about 200 families asking for help with their investigation. The letter was a model of what not to do, according to lawyers and professors looking at the issue 40 plus years later. The authorities also asked therapists to help interview hundreds of children. They questioned them for hours at a time, often asking leading and suggestive questions. In 1986, prosecutors charged 7 employees at McMartin with more than 100 counts of child molestation and conspiracy. A week later, they dropped the charges against 5 defendants, citing weak evidence. All the defendants maintained their innocence. By then, the case was a national spectacle, and prosecutors pursued it despite growing doubts about the original accuser's story and a variety of fantastical claims from interviews, which included a goat man, bloody animal sacrifices, a school employee who could fly, and acts of violence that left no physical trace. But the trial would not end for years, with no convictions, and prosecutors around the country started dozens of cases like it. Very credible seeming people were saying, occult ritual abuse is all around you. We've seen it, and the signs are visible if you know how to look for it. Mr. Lanning, the retired FBI agent, said that as a deluge of calls about strange abuse began in 1983, he tried to investigate with an open mind, saying, my attitude was yes, most anything is possible, but where's the evidence? So FBI agents, police officers, lawyers, and social workers gathered what they could and shared their findings at conferences and seminars. They handed out satanic calendars, traded pamphlets about symbols like the Cross of Nero and the Horned Hand, and copied lists of supposed occult organizations, which included a collective of feminist astrologers in Minnesota. A lot of this stuff was being disseminated by law enforcement without efforts to corroborate it, Mr. Lanning said. One cop would come up and say, what a load of crap, but then another would say, I've got to learn more. In May 1985, the news program 2020 ran a segment on Satan worship that described animal mutilations clearly used in some kind of bizarre ritual, rock music that was associated with devil worship, satanic graffiti, and backward messages and pop songs. Oh, wait, that's a teaser for the next entry on this list.
When you get into one of these groups, there's only a couple ways you can get out. One is death, the other is mental institutions. Or the third, you can't get out.
That's terrifying, and that's no choice.
Serious business.
If the police were aware of this, it might be that they could get to the instigators, to the top people. Why isn't there more awareness on the part of the police?
Police are very reluctant to investigate these crimes as satanic crimes, Barbara, because communities quite naturally don't want their reputation stigmatized as being the home of the devil. They prefer to try to categorize them as drug-related crimes, sex-related crimes, or robbery or something.
How would a parent be aware?
Many youngsters are into it, teenagers and younger, and the clues are there. The satanic symbol, 666, if you see that written on your child's notebook, if they're into heavy metal music, if they're associating with strange characters or drifting off to ceremonies and not explaining where they're at, it's well worth it for parents to look deeper and ask, what exactly are you up to?
And with whom?
Because this is serious.
As for the satanic panic, it lingered well into the 90s and was amplified by the case of the West Memphis Three. But eventually, due to the lack of evidence supporting the numerous satanic cult claims and the media reports debunking them, the panic came to an end. The West Memphis Three were finally released from prison in 2011 after 18 years behind bars. Back in the 1980s, it was a big deal when Tipper Gore took on rock music. Most news stories at the time went over my head, but not this one. This was all about censorship. I may not have understood the complexities of the issue, but it was still very memorable for this 80s kid. As Mental Floss tells it, it all started with Prince. In 1985, Mary Elizabeth Tipper Gore decided to sit down and listen to an album she had just purchased for her 11-year-old daughter, Karina. Purple Rain was being hailed as a masterpiece, and although Prince was perceived as somewhat of a salacious performer, nothing on the album's sleeve indicated it would be inappropriate for children. So when Gore and her daughter were listening to Darling Nikki, a song where Prince sings about self-pleasure, she was shocked. The future Second Lady couldn't believe that music with sexual overtones was available without any kind of advisory or warning labels. She was angered further when she tried to return Purple Rain to the store and was told that they could not offer her a refund because it had been opened. While most parents would simply discard the album, Gore, the wife of then Senator and future Vice President Al Gore, had the power to take it a step further. By the end of the year, Tipper Gore would be testifying during a Senate hearing that also demanded answers from the likes of Dee Snider, Frank Zappa, and John Denver.
Some of the album covers are very explicit. In fact, they look like they should be in Playboy or Penthouse, some of them. And they're in the record bins available to young children. But others, you can't tell. I bought the Purple Rain album for our 11-year-old, and I didn't know that Darling Nikki was on it, and I felt that it was inappropriate for her and her 8- and 6-year-old sister to hear a song describing a girl masturbating in a hotel lobby.
While sexual subtext has always been present in music, Gore felt the 80s were a tipping point. Along with her fellow Washington wives, Susan Baker, the wife of Ronald Reagan's Treasury Secretary James Baker, Sally Nevius, the wife of ex-Washington City Council Chairman John Nevius, and Pam Hauer, the wife of local realtor Raymond Hauer, Gore formed the Parents Music Resource Council, or the PMRC, with the mission of providing parents with disclosures about the content of albums. Gore likened the project to the Motion Picture Association of America, or MPAA, which had a ratings board for movies. Gore argued that the Record Industry Association of America, or RIAA, should have something similar, suggesting an X for profane or sexually graphic lyrics, O for satanic or occult content, DA for drugs and alcohol, and V for violence. To draw attention to the goal, the PMRC circulated what was known as the Filthy 15, a scandal sheet that shamed what the group felt were the most offensive songs in circulation. They included Eat Me Alive by Judas Priest, Sugar Walls by Sheena Easton, and We're Not Gonna Take It by Twisted Sister. They were all deemed objectionable and deserving of X, O, V, and or DA labeling. The ensuing public dialogue over whether music should be labeled resulted in a Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee hearing held in September of 1985. Gore was asked to speak, as were musicians like Frank Zappa and Dee Snider, neither of whom were enthusiastic about the PMRC's objectives. Likening such regulation to treating dandruff by decapitation, Zappa insisted such steps infringed on civil liberties, including for those buying the albums, and amounted to an attack on the First Amendment.
If you consider that the public needs to be warned about the contents of the records, what better way than to let them see exactly what the songs say? That way you don't have to put any kind of subjective rating on the record. You don't have to call it R, X, D, A, anything. You can read it for yourself.
Snyder agreed, saying that any review board evaluating music stood a high chance of misinterpreting lyrics.
It's not really a wild leap of the imagination to jump to the conclusion that that's about something other than surgery or hospitals, neither of which are mentioned in the song.
No, it's not a wild jump, and I think what I said in one part was that songs allow a person to put their own imagination, experiences, and dreams into the lyrics. People can interpret it many ways. Ms. Gore was looking for sadomasochism and bondage, and she found it. Someone looking for surgical references would have found it as well.
Surprisingly, John Denver was critical of the PMRC as well, recalling that his hit, Rocky Mountain High, had encountered resistance from some radio stations, owing to its non-existent hits at drug use. The PMRC, Denver said, reminded him more of a Nazi book-burning regime. As expected, some politicians used the hearing as a pulpit to flirt with censorship. It is outrageous filth, and we must do something about it, South Carolina Senator Ernest F. Halling said. If I could find some way constitutionally to get rid of it, I would. Other senators held up rock posters or played music videos they considered offensive. Under threat of possible government legislation, the RIAA agreed to institute a parental notification system. In a form of self-policing, the record labels themselves would deem which lyrics were potentially offensive. It would not be as elaborate as the rating system recommended by the PMRC, and so-called cult mentions wouldn't be labeled. There would instead be a single sticker affixed to albums with sex, drugs, or violent content. And it read, Parental Advisory, Explicit Lyrics. Gore remained adamant she was never out to ban any type of music, only to alert parents to music they might deem inappropriate for children. But the advisory label, or what some folks called the tipper sticker, had consequences that went far beyond that. Some stores, like Walmart, refused to carry albums with the warning. Certain venues prohibited artists with the label from performing, and then there was the reverse psychology effect. Broadcasting that certain albums were controversial made people, especially teenagers, want them even more. In 1988, Gore broadened the scope of her watchdog efforts by singling out MTV for suggestive music videos. The PMRC helped convene a symposium in which the potentially harmful effects of kids watching such content was discussed. There were consequences for Gore, too. There was speculation that Al Gore's 1988 Democratic presidential run was hampered by Tipper's visibility and crusade, which may have roiled entertainment factions that normally leaned liberal. Gore would ultimately become vice president, and then when he ran again for president in 2000, he actually received an unlikely endorsement from Dee Snider, who contributed his endorsement to their similar views on the environment and abortion rights. Though the RIAA still advocates for use of the parental advisory label, it seems to have less influence in the age of streaming digital music. There remains no clear consensus on whether such warnings keep adult-oriented material away from kids, or what the possible psychological consequences might be if they don't. More often than not, adolescent rebellion tends to resist such barriers. On January 27, 1984, the Jacksons gathered at Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles to begin filming a promotional Pepsi commercial for their upcoming Victory Tour that summer. The concept of the commercial was a rather simple one: to showcase the Jacksons performing a Pepsi rendition of Billie Jean in front of thousands of fans, with Michael's entrance being a dazzling one. The pyrotechnics were to go off right as Michael appeared at the top of the set of steps for a show-stopping introduction. Except, 6 takes in, they still felt like they hadn't gotten the money shot. I'll let Jackson tell the story in his own words, courtesy of his 1988 autobiography, Moonwalk. I had planned to spend most of 1984 working on some movie ideas I had, but those plans got sidetracked. First, in January, I was burned on the set of a Pepsi commercial I was shooting with my brothers. The reason for the fire was stupidity. pure and simple. We were shooting at night, and I was supposed to come down a staircase with magnesium flash bombs going off on either side of me and just behind me. It seemed so simple. I was to walk down the stairs, and these bombs would blow up behind me. We did several takes that were wonderfully timed. The lightning effects from the bombs were great. Only later did I find out that these bombs were only 2 feet away from either side of my head, which was a total disregard of the safety regulations. Then Bob Giraldi, the director, came to me and said, "Michael, you're going down too early. We want to see you up there, up on the stairs. When the lights come on, we want to reveal that you're there, so wait." So I waited. The bombs went off on either side of my head, and the sparks set my hair on fire. I was dancing down this ramp and turning around, spinning, not knowing I was on fire. Suddenly, I felt my hands reflexively going to my head in an attempt to smother the flames. I fell down and just tried to shake the flames out. Germain turned around and saw me on the ground just after the explosions had gone off, and he thought I had been shot by someone in the crowd because we were shooting in front of a big audience. That's what it looked like to him. Miko Brando, who works for me, was the first person to reach me. After that, it was chaos. It was crazy. No film could properly capture the drama of what went on that night. The crowd was screaming. Someone shouted, "Get some ice!" There were frantic running sounds. People were yelling, "Oh no!" The emergency truck came up, and before they put me in, I saw the Pepsi executives huddled together in a corner looking terrified. I remember the medical people putting me on a cot, and the guys from Pepsi were so scared they couldn't even bring themselves to check on me. Once the fire was put out, Jackson was taken to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center and from there transported to Brotman Memorial Hospital Burn Center in Culver City, California. Upon arriving, Jackson was diagnosed with and treated for second-degree burns. Here's some more of what Jackson had to say about the accident in his autobiography. "Meanwhile, I was kind of detached, despite the terrible pain. I was watching all the drama unfold. Later, they told me I was in shock, but I remember enjoying the ride to the hospital because I never thought I'd ride in an ambulance with the sirens wailing. It was one of those things I had always wanted to do when I was growing up. When we got there, they told me there were news crews outside, so I asked for my glove. Later on, one of the doctors told me that it was a miracle I was alive. One of the firemen had mentioned that in most cases, your clothes catch on fire, in which case your whole face can be disfigured or you can die. That's it. I had third-degree burns in the back of my head that almost went through to my skull, so I had lots of problems with it, but I was very lucky. The doctor said that once the wound healed, there should be no scars. The surgeon used the laser to reconstruct a palm-sized burn on the back of Mr. Jackson's head. He said he was able to stitch the wound without having a transplant or implant hair from other parts of his head. Furthermore, it's been reported that Jackson was no longer able to grow hair in the impacted areas of his scalp after the respective burn and surgery, resulting in him having to wear hair pieces for the remainder of his life. Jackson was just 25 years old at the time, and he had to quickly come to terms with the fact that he could never again walk around freely wearing his own hair without a very large and noticeable bald spot. Cosmetic effects aside, what was even more devastating was the immense side effects in regards to his pain. Karen Fay, Jackson's longtime makeup artist, testified to some of these effects during the 2013 AEG trial that took place in the aftermath of Jackson's passing. As per the Los Angeles Times, Fay stated that aside from the daily scalp pain he experienced, Jackson was also suffering from intense migraines. And the procedures didn't stop with that first April 1984 operation. In fact, that was only the beginning. According to True Michael Jackson, one of Jackson's doctors named Arnold Klein detailed how Jackson's lupus prevented the wounds from ever healing properly. Klein said, "What happened is he used a great deal of what are called tissue expanders in his scalp, which are balloons that blow up the scalp. And then what they do is they try to cut out the scar. Well, because he had lupus, what happened is that every time they would do it, the bald spot would keep enlarging. So he went through a lot of painful procedures with these tissue expanders until I put a stop to it. I said no more tissue expanders because he had to wear a hat all the time and it was really painful for him." By 1993, almost a full decade after the Pepsi burn, Jackson's pain still had not gone away, resulting in him undergoing yet another painful scalp procedure. In November of that same year, Jackson announced publicly that he would be concluding the second leg of his Dangerous World Tour due to seeking treatment at a facility for a painkiller addiction. The initial combination of medications that he was given at the time of the burn was pretty powerful, with a history of causing dependency issues, and Michael ended up struggling with those issues the rest of his life. The hair pieces and extensions Jackson used for roughly 20 years after the accident were painful to install and keep in, Despite that pain, he continued wearing them to match the curls he had been wearing before for nearly 2 decades. I will end this segment on a positive note, though. Some of Jackson's time at Brotman Memorial Hospital Burn Center in 1984 was spent visiting and speaking with the other patients at the facility. Rather than suing Pepsi for the accident, Jackson instead had them donate $1.5 million to Brotman's Burn Center, which was renamed the Michael Jackson Burn Center by the facility as a gesture of gratitude. Here's what Jackson said about it in his autobiography. I still remember how scared those Pepsi executives looked the night of the fire. They thought that my getting burned would leave a bad taste in the mouth of every kid in America who drank Pepsi. They knew I could have sued them, and I could have. But I was real nice about it. Real nice. They gave me $1.5 million, which I immediately donated to the Michael Jackson Burn Center. I wanted to do something because I was so moved by the other burn patients I met while I was in the hospital.
You're the Pepsi generation. The thrill of the day. Feel the Pepsi way. You're a whole new generation.
Okay, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. Also turn on your notifications so you know as soon as I drop part 2. Okay, bye.